So you can't read all of this, but this is sort of important, and you don't have to memorize any of this stuff. We as the city, using our engineers at that time in 2017, proposed a set of projects that we would implement in lieu of the 710 freeway not being completed. Freeway didn't continue, traffic continued to be dumped, and we proposed. Now, I'm not going to take you through all the different gory details of how these costs moved around in time. I have 140 slides. I only intend to use 50 of them. The others are all overflow. So we can only get to that if we need to. But two of the biggest projects, and we'll come back to these repeatedly. In fact, this will be the two big projects that I'm going to talk about. One is called the 710 Interstate 10 reconfiguration. We're going to call that the stub or due to some money moving around, this has a current budget of little less than $63 million. There is another project. This is the interchange between Fremont Avenue and Interstate 10. But this is, over time, a little bit more complicated because it is not just the interchange, but something called the braided ramp, and I'm going to talk about that. That has a current budget of $100 million. There are two other projects similar to the Fremont interchange, which is at Garfield and Atlantic and I-10, and those have budgets of $20 million each. These are current budgets, okay? And then we had proposed some bridge improvements. As you know, in Alhambra, we have north-south traffic crossing the railroad trench, and there are bridges on that. We had proposed a railroad bridge widening at Mission and Atlantic, Mission and Garfield, and even at Fremont Avenue and the bridge. And then there were a bunch of, in a lump, what I'm going to call traffic synchronization projects to make traffic flow better on arterial streets. You can see the arterial streets: Garfield, Fremont, Atlantic, Main, Mission Valley. All of those collectively about $24 million. And then a pedestrian plan due to some reallocations that got approved in 2024 with roughly $14 million. Now, if you're following this and you have your calculator, you can add it all up. You'll get pretty close to $241 million.
The stub they were talking about.
Yeah, just wait. I'm going to get to the stub in detail. So how much of that is available today? I'm going to jump right into it, okay? Since we don't have all evening. First of all, the $241 million was in 2017 dollars. Now, all of you know that dollars buy less as time goes on, correct? The purchasing power of a dollar in 2017 was different than the purchasing power of the same dollar today. It doesn't buy you more, it buys you less, right? We'll come back to that. But if we take all those projects that I showed you before, the city has completed none of them to date, okay? Zero. Not any of these projects has been completed today, roughly 7, 8, 9 years later. But the synchronization projects and the pedestrian plan are moving forward, okay? So we will take them off the table. We'll say they are committed dollars. They might come in over budget, but we'll take our chances and we'll say that $14 and $24 million are set aside because of the synchronization projects and the pedestrian plan. Now, some of you might be wondering, we actually had a bike and pedestrian plan that was passed. Unfortunately, there's not money enough for the bike portion of it. It's just the pedestrian part. That's a separate story. So you do the math, you take these out, roughly $203 million, minus some money that has been spent by consultants to date, about $3 million. So you are just leaving it in round terms. We have at most $200 million, remember in 2017 dollars, or what I'm going to call nominal dollars, right? That's just the amount of money. regardless of purchasing power. That's nominal dollars. Now, this is a question that's come up. Wow, is that money sitting somewhere? Do we get interest on that? No. This money is coming to us from something called Measure R. Measure R is part of the sales tax, and I'm not going to put you on the spot, but we pay something north of 10% when we buy things, correct, that have sales tax in Alhambra. About 0.5% of that goes to Measure R. Anybody that buys anything taxable in LA County pays into Measure R. All Alhambrans, when they buy anything taxable, pay into Measure R, regardless of whether they're buying it in Alhambra or anywhere in LA County. And what that money is done is every year it's accumulated by Metro and allocated to different projects that they have approved. So the money comes in and the money is funded out. It's not like a pot of money sitting there getting interest. And Measure R, this is, I'm going to stress this, is our sales tax money. It's not some Uncle XYZ sitting in city ABC. It is our sales tax money. So if we are not using it, somebody else is using it. Just to give you an example, at any given time, there are all kinds of projects happening in LA County using Measure R monies. Okay? This money Metro is allocating to different people, and so they have an account. Alhambra has those projects there. When Alhambra is good and ready to move on them, they will fund that project up to those dollar amounts. If we're not ready to do that, well, Metro is waiting for us to do our job so they can write those checks to our year to January 2029, because as we are sitting here, standing here today, even if we jumped on our projects, nothing will get done for the majority of them until 2029 or a year thereafter. And I'm only using 3% inflation, which is conservative. Inflation has been running higher than that. So the purchasing value, very simply, in 2029 of the 241 million is 140 million. So that is a loss of at least 100 million plus in purchasing power. Just think about that. Alhambra has never gotten that kind of money ever since 1885 or whenever the city was incorporated. And it will likely never see that kind of money unless we all get very lucky. So we lost $100 million. Now you can say, well, Ron, how's that anybody's fault? You know, inflation happens, right? But that's looking at it the wrong way. This is not the end. The delays that were caused by not implementing projects are what caused the loss of purchasing power. A really important concept. If there were movement, implementation, fewer delays, projects getting implemented, you would have had less loss. So the root cause is delay. The root cause is delays of projects, which has led to the erosion of this massive amount of purchasing power. This is math, my friends, okay? Whether you like Ron Sahu, whether you hate Ron Sahu, whether you like grassroots, whether you don't like grassroots, you're entitled to your opinions. But math is math, inflation is inflation, and this amount of money has evaporated. Okay? Let me go back to the big four projects. If you recall, I had mentioned this slide There are two projects here, the stub and the Fremont, and then the two others. This is from a presentation from our consultants, and this has repeatedly been shown a few years ago, that the focus is these are the four big projects. Now, all of you should see this is basically the 10 freeway. This is the 710 coming and ending on Valley. This is Fremont Avenue here and a project there. This is Atlantic and this is Garfield. Remember collectively, if you're remembering the math, $63 million, $100 million, and $20 million each, right? That's the bulk of the projects. So what is the dispute really, or the disagreement with the city? I want to be very stark about it. What is the central point of difference that as grassroots or as me as personally as a citizen has with what has happened or not happened? And in summary, even though not one of these projects has broken ground, as I told you, not one. The earliest there will be some projects done is the pedestrian plan in 2027. Thank you, Efren, for reminding me. The city thinks that all of the projects, including the big four, will be completed by 2031. The city thinks that's the case. The city thinks that all of them will be completed. And we disagree. And we'll get into the reasons why we disagree. But this is a central difference. We both can't be right. We just can't. So let me start with the Fremont project. Because here's what happened, without getting into the history. In the beginning, in 2020, we hired a consultant, and the consultant said, you know, that is the main project. The main project for Alhambra is really this project, the stub. That is the project. That's the project why we got to measure our money, right? The 710 ended in the stub, and to solve that problem. And in 2020, they agreed that that is our main goal. They made a presentation to the city council, and said, city council said, yeah, that's a local control project, move on that. And then they went off for about 9 to 12 months and came back and said, you know what, we kind of changed our minds. We changed our minds. We think this project, the second project here, is really the answer to Alhambra's traffic problems, which is a really odd thing. When I started looking at this in 2023, that didn't make any sense to me. So they said that that project, with a new element called a braided ramp. Now you're going to hear terms that are unfortunate for somebody like me. You can hear the terms like weave and braids. And for somebody that has no hair, it's just absolutely mortifying and insulting, okay? But there they are, okay? We're going to hear about weaves and braids, and so you'll have to you just bear with me for that, okay? But they said this project will go first with no basis, or the only basis is what legally is called dicta. You know what dicta means? Dicta means when something comes out of your mouth and people have to accept it as the truth. So I started asking for the basis for why that project was put in the lead position. And the answer I got, not from city council, but from staff, was that our consultants told us that that's the project to do first. And they had a reason. We're going to get into that in a second. And you'll have to wait for that for just a couple more slides. But it is putting this project first that has caused a delay, and this is a decision by the city. It's not a decision by Grassroots Alhambra. It's not a decision by the San Gabriel Valley COG. It's not a decision by Metro. It is not a decision by Caltrans. It is a decision solely and purely driven by the city of Alhambra and its staff. We recommended that project because our consultants that we hired, sole source, by the way, that we hired, sole source meaning only opinion that we got from them, is the cause what $200 million has evaporated. Council and city might disagree. We can have a debate on the facts. any day of their choosing, any place, any time. We will bring facts, and they can argue the other position.